June 4, 2015. It was morning in Chandel district of Manipur. A convoy of 4 vehicles from the Dogra regiment was moving forward through narrow and rough jungle roads. The soldiers were returning to their base after completing their duty. Every soldier carried the hope of meeting their families in their hearts. One was thinking about the toys he would bring for his children, while another was imagining the taste of food cooked by his mother. But they had no idea that death was waiting ahead in the dense jungle, coiled like a snake. Hidden in the bushes were around 50 terrorists with their faces covered in black cloth. They were armed with deadly assault rifles, rocket-propelled grenades, and improvised explosive devices. They were lying in ambush, planning a brutal attack. The soldiers had now entered the deepest and most deserted valley of the jungle. Suddenly, one of the terrorists hiding in the bushes took his position and locked his rocket launcher onto the lead vehicle of the convoy. The others aimed their sniper rifles and light machine guns directly at the soldiers and at the fuel tanks of the vehicles. At that moment, the tire of the lead vehicle rolled over a sharp object and burst. The vehicle stopped with a sudden jerk, forcing the entire convoy to halt. Then suddenly a deafening explosion shook the valley. A powerful IED blast threw the lead truck high into the air. Immediately after that, the terrorists hiding in the bushes opened indiscriminate fire on the soldiers. Hundreds of bullets every second ripped through the vehicles and pierced the bodies of the soldiers. RPG rockets turned the other vehicles into fireballs. After the one-sided attack, the terrorists did what they always did. Like cowardly vultures, they crossed the border and escaped into the dense jungles of Myanmar. They believed they had succeeded once again and would now sit comfortably after another kill. But they had made a terrible mistake. They had put their hand in the mouth of a lion. What they did not realize was that India of 2015 was a new India. This was not the India that would simply issue a strong condemnation and remain silent. The terrorists belonged to the National Socialist Council of Nagaland, or NSCN. Along with them were militants from the Kangle Yavul Kanna Lub group, or KYKL. SS Khaplang, the mastermind behind this terrorist organization, wanted to carve out Nagaland and create an independent country called Nagalim. He believed that the Indian constitution was being imposed on them by force. In 2001, the government of India had signed a ceasefire agreement with this group to maintain peace in the northeast. But in March 2015, Khaplang suddenly broke the ceasefire. Because the real players behind this game of chess was someone else. This terrorist group was receiving back-channel funding, modern weapons and training directly from Pakistan's ISI and from China. Their motive was clear: keep India's northeast unstable so that the Indian army would remain distracted with internal security instead of focusing on the borders. The open and unfenced Myanmar border allowed these terrorists to freely run drug trafficking networks. They collected money every month from shops and households across the northeast by threatening people. They called it protection money. With all this power and support, their arrogance grew so much that they dared to challenge the Indian army. At the Para-SF base in Manipur, a 35-year-old experienced officer sat restlessly in his chair. Lieutenant Colonel Oscar Delta. He could not close his eyes for even a moment. Whenever he blinked, he saw the burning truck and the bodies of his 18 brothers. Oscar Delta was not an ordinary soldier. During his 15-year career, he had spent his life hunting terrorists in the jungles of the northeast. His name alone was enough to create fear among militants. In fact, a bounty was placed on his head, dead or alive. But this time, the honor of the nation was at stake. Oscar Delta quietly cleaned his custom M4A1 carabine. Deep inside, he knew his time was coming. Considering the seriousness of the situation, Prime Minister Narendra Modi immediately called a high-level emergency cabinet meeting at the Prime Minister's office.
Present in the meeting were Defense Minister Manohar Parrikar, National Security Advisor Ajit Doval, Army Chief General Dalbir Singh Suhag, Home Minister Rajnath Singh, and Defense Secretary R.K. Mathur. As the meeting began, a fierce anger could be seen on Prime Minister Modi's face, something few people had ever witnessed before. Looking directly at the army chief, he asked in a heavy voice, "Dalbir, what does the intelligence report say? 18 of my soldiers have been killed. I want answers for the tears of their mothers." General Dalbir Singh replied with determination and anger, "Sir, my soldiers are holding back their rage right now. A volcano of anger is building among them. Just give us the order, and we will hunt these terrorists down and reduce them to ashes." At that moment, Ajit Doval spoke. "Prime Minister, the terrorists are no longer inside our territory. After the attack, they crossed the border and are hiding in the dense jungles of Myanmar. They believe the international border is a line that India will never cross." He paused and then said firmly, This time, we must enter the lion's den. If we don't eliminate them in their own territory today, they will turn the Northeast into another Kashmir, and the world will think India is a weak country. Home Minister Rajnath Singh asked in surprise, "Mr. Doval, are you suggesting crossing the Myanmar border?" Ajit Doval looked straight into his eyes and nodded confidently. Then General Dalbir Singh spoke again. "Sir, death must answer death. We have two options, an airstrike or a covert ground strike. But airstrikes are risky because the terrorist camps are located very close to local villages in Myanmar. Bombing them could cause civilian casualties." Prime Minister Modi asked one final question. "Dalbir, how much time do your soldiers need to prepare?" General Dalbir Singh answered with complete confidence. "Sir, give me 3 days. Before sunrise on the 4th day, the funeral pyres of those terrorists will already be burning." Prime Minister Modi replied calmly, "Then remind them of their place. Go and tell them that the new India knows how to enter an enemy's home and strike." The meeting ended. The decision had been made. The countdown for the operation had begun. On the morning of June 7th, before sunrise, 64 para-SF commandos stood fully armed and ready. They carried Carl Gustaf 84mm rocket launchers, TAR-21 assault rifles, M4 carbines, AK-47s, and underbarrel grenade launchers. This was not an ordinary squad. These were angels of death, ready to send the enemy straight to hell. The mission was kept completely secret. Even the slightest hint that the Indian army was crossing the border could have turned the entire jungle into a deadly trap. That is why helicopters were not used. The commandos were transported in army trucks to the border under the disguise of a routine infantry movement. After stepping down from the trucks, Oscar Delta performed a ritual that filled every soldier present with pride. He handed his rifle to a fellow soldier, knelt down on the ground, and kissed the soil of India. Then he applied that soil to his forehead like a sacred mark. Watching him, every commando did the same. They kissed the soil and placed it on their foreheads. Then the journey began. With 35 kilograms of gear on their shoulders, the commandos started a 40-kilometer trek through terrible terrain, dense bushes, and steep mountain climbs. Oscar Delta walked in front. 2 Burmese local guides were with them. After crossing the border into Myanmar, the guides suddenly signaled everyone to stop.
Strange noises were coming from the thick bushes ahead. Every commando immediately aimed his rifle in that direction. Suddenly, 5 civilians emerged from the bushes carrying large monitor lizards on their shoulders. They were Burmese hunters. But in a situation like this, no one could be trusted. Were they really hunters or spies for the militants? Options flashed rapidly through Oscar Delta's mind. Killing them would have been easy, but spilling innocent blood without proof was against the principles of the Indian Army. Letting them go was also risky. They could warn the enemy. So Delta made a decision. They would be taken along as detainees until the strike position was reached. By afternoon, the mountain behind which the enemy camps were located became visible. But another problem arose. A commando quietly approached Delta and whispered, "Sir, everyone's water is finished. Not a single drop is left." June heat, 35 kilograms of load, a 40-kilometer climb, and now no water. For any ordinary soldier, this could have been a reason to give up, but Oscar Delta smiled and replied, "Good, that means we'll have to finish this mission even faster. Their food, their water, and their beer. Tonight, all of that will belong to us, and we'll celebrate there." By the night of June 8th, the para-SF commandos had reached the top of the mountain. Below them, in the valley, 3 enemy camps were clearly visible. The commandos switched on their night vision goggles and thermal imagers. The terrorists moving inside the camps became visible. These were the same men who had burned the Dogra Regiment soldiers alive just days earlier. Tonight, the account would be settled. But patience would be tested. At exactly 10 p.m., sudden gunfire echoed through the jungle. Every Indian commando aimed his rifle and took cover. Through the night vision devices, they saw 5 or 6 terrorists coming out of the camp and climbing the slope of the same mountain where the commandos were hiding. They were only 150 meters away. Heartbeats rose. If they came any closer, firing would become unavoidable and the element of surprise would be lost. But the terrorists were drunk.
They held liquor bottles in their hands and were loudly singing Hindi songs. After randomly firing in the air, they stumbled back toward their camp. It was probably their routine patrol. At 1 p.m., more random firing happened. 10 minutes later, silence returned. At 3 a.m., it happened again. The terrorists were repeatedly firing in the air to show their presence. Oscar Delta realized something. Under such circumstances, the original plan of attacking from 3 different directions needed to change. He quickly reorganized the squads. We will form 2 squads of 20 each. One will conduct the direct assault. The other will provide covering fire and secure the exit route. He then said quietly, "At 5 a.m., when they gather for breakfast, we hit them hard, very hard." Crawling on their stomachs, 40 commandos moved toward their targets like shadows of death. Soon, they formed a semicircle just outside the camp. Inside the camp, the militants were preparing breakfast. Some were lighting fires, some were laughing and joking. They had no idea that the very soldiers they insulted were sitting in their courtyard with guns aimed at their chests. This would be their last meal of their lives. Only a few minutes remained before 5 a.m. Oscar Delta scanned the target area one final time. 3 sentry posts stood ahead. The first was empty. The second had 4 militants. The third had 2. Then the order came. Fire. 2 rockets from Carl Gustaf launchers blasted directly into the sentry posts. Within seconds, 6 terrorists were dead. And then the real storm began. Indian commandos unleashed fire.
40 automatic weapons rode together. But this was not random shooting. This was precise, professional combat. Every commando moved like a machine. Their speed was so fast that the enemy didn't even get a chance to lift their guns. The militants ran around like headless chickens. For the first 25 minutes, not a single shot came from their side. Their tents were shredded. Their weapons lay scattered. The entire encounter lasted 45 minutes. During that time, the Indian commandos fired 15,000 rounds, threw 150 grenades, and launched nearly a dozen rockets. 2 enemy camps were completely destroyed. The third was more than half destroyed. More than 50 militants were killed. And most importantly, not a single Indian commander was even scratched. The blood debt of the Dogra regiment soldiers was fully repaid. The mission was complete. Oscar Delta ordered his men to withdraw. The 5 Burmese hunters who had been detained were now released. Delta not only untied them, but also gave each of them 5,000 rupees from his own pocket. Back in Manipur, tension was extremely high. It was already 6 a.m. Lieutenant General Bipin Rawat kept looking at his watch again and again. Why had no signal arrived yet? Suddenly, the satellite phone beeped. Rawat grabbed it instantly. A heavy and exhausted voice came from the other side, but it was filled with pride. "Mission accomplished, sir. I repeat, mission accomplished." The message was immediately forwarded to Army Chief General Dalbir Singh and from there to Prime Minister Modi, NSA Ajit Doval and the Defence Minister. At around 3 p.m., the 64 Para-SF commandos finally reached the first Indian village near the border. They were covered in mud and gunpowder. Many were dehydrated and exhausted, but the peace on their faces was priceless. As they entered the village, Oscar Delta saw a small shop. He bought every bottle of Myanmar beer available there. Sitting with his soldiers, they drank together. Half of their exhaustion disappeared instantly. After days of intense tension, the commandos were finally breathing freely, laughing again. At around 6 p.m., Dhruv helicopters from the Army Aviation Corps landed. All the commandos were safely flown back to base. A few minutes later, the government of India held a press conference that shocked the entire world. India officially announced that it had entered Myanmar and carried out a cross-border strike against terrorists. It was the first time in history that India openly acknowledged such an operation. On August 14, 2015, Lieutenant Colonel Oscar Delta was awarded the Kirti Chakra for his extraordinary bravery. Friends, if you liked the video, please like it. And to watch more spine-chilling stories like this, subscribe to His Doc Official. Until next time, Jai Hind.